In the house, or Xavier loans? Okay, so I started my college career out here at Xavier University. So I'm a proud member of the Gold Rush. Thank you for being in the audience. And so I feel like I'm coming home. And so this is so nice. You know, when the plane was descending, about to land, I started to hear the second line music in my head. There's just something about New Orleans that just makes you feel really, really good and really special. So thank you for having me here today. So what an honor to be featured as your keynote speaker at the Winifred Burks-Houck Leadership Luncheon. And I want to first say congratulations to all of the award winners. Can we give them a hand? You know, I want to talk about a number of things today, but I only have 20 minutes. So, forgive me because I definitely want to take some questions at the end. So I'll talk about scientific leadership at first. You know, when you think about scientific leadership from a historical standpoint, you think about individuals oftentimes. Individuals that changed the scientific discussion. They were disruptors. They caused the conversation to change. They made great discoveries. They worked in these laboratories and these silos, often by themselves, to come up with these great creations, these wonderful advancements, and new ways to apply technology and maybe even recreate methodologies into something that's new and fresh and innovative. But today, when you talk about scientific leadership, most scientific leaders don't work in silos anymore. You know, you've got to tap the best and brightest individuals from various specialties outside of your own in order to look at something novel, look at something unique, and investigate it from perspectives that you may not necessarily think of because that's not your personal area of expertise. So in order to advance today as a scientific leader, you need to know how to, work across the aisle. Work with different leaders that are not inside your comfort zone. So I challenge all of you students, some of you who are chemistry majors, biology majors, engineering majors, physics majors, from all across the STEM subjects, to learn how to reach across and to tap into working with people who are not in your field. And those of you who are mentoring our young scientists, equip them with those skills. Because a lot of times, sometimes your specialty becomes your advisor's specialty by default. Am I right? That's not necessarily what you're interested in, but you've signed on to work in that laboratory. And so now, you're like, okay, well, I'm not an inorganic chemist, but I'm going to have to study inorganic chemistry because Dr. Bobby Wilson was my advisor when I got my PhD. But do you think that happened to me? No, I'm a biologist. So I said, okay, look, we're going to have to make this way more biological. And I tell you, Dr. Wilson and I, we had some discussion. You're just making me into too much of a biologist. Am I right, Dr. Wilson? So, students, yes, you have to speak to your advisors. You have to open their minds as well and let them know what you're interested in. And, give them a new and maybe creative or innovative way to think about something that will relate to their subject matter that they love so much, and also bring in the subject matter that you love so much. Ask them the questions. I had a lot of people coming up to me yesterday at the career fair, and they were asking me, what is some advice that you'd give me? Given everything that I've been through as far as education-wise, if there's one thing I could do over or I could add on, I would add business classes at a very young age. And some of you told me, well, my advisor told me they don't want me to take business classes right now because it's going to take me away from my research. Well, I'm here to say, do it anyway. And the reason I'm saying do it anyway is because, throughout this conference we're talking about innovation, we're talking about entrepreneurship, and I'm an entrepreneur, and many of you are entrepreneurs, and most of us are multipreneurs, which means you have multiple businesses. And you may still have a traditional job or career where you work for someone else. So if you're a multipreneur, you really need to know business. You need to know how to write a business plan. And not just attend a workshop on writing business plans. You need to know and study how to write a business plan. You need to learn about venture capitalists. You need to learn what societies and what groups, even social groups, that you need to reach out to so that you can get people involved and want to back you as your investor, give you seed money. Because there are so many different ways to get funding these days that it's not just about writing grants. But yet, also, you better not leave school and not know how to write a grant, okay? You've got to know how to write a grant. You've got to know how to answer a call for proposal, a request for proposal. You have to know how to do this. So that means when your major advisor is writing their grant, you want to get involved. That wasn't a choice for me. That wasn't a choice for any of Dr. Wilson's students, because he made us go in there and help write his grants. He made us go in there and help review his grants. He asked us to pick out, what is the weakness in here? What are the strengths? What would you add to this? So we had to learn. We had to do that hands-on. And sometimes you may not have wanted to do that. Maybe you wanted to go home, but it was so worth it. So again, if there's any advice I give you, take more business classes. Learn how to balance your budget. Learn how to do long-term planning. Learn whether or not you need a brick-and-mortar business or if you can be a virtual consultant, which is what I am. Sometimes we get caught up in wanting to show off and have, this is my office. Well, you may not necessarily need that office because you don't have customers that need to come to you. You need to go to your customers. So your business, your bottom line will do much better if you don't have this brick-and-mortar business. So just some things to think about. So scientific leadership, getting back to scientific leadership. A lot of the consortiums and coalitions that you see between different universities, I love to see that because, when NASA or when other government entities have these long-term grants or they want you to develop some type of research center of excellence, they want a consortium. They are not looking at single universities anymore. So develop these consortiums, learn how to work with other universities while you're an undergraduate, while you're in graduate school, and beyond. Somebody gave me their resume yesterday, and he said, I'm looking at a way to use waste products and create them, turn them into something that is novel and useful. Do you have a use for that? I said, I may in the future, because I do work with international businesses, and so give me your resume. Yes, I may not hire you right now, but I will say this, and tomorrow, or next week, or 2 months from now, I may call him and I say, I need your technology. I need that expertise. So there's a saying, closed mouths don't get fed, right? So talk about what you want. Talk about what you need. Talk about where you want to go in the world. And always be grateful. Always, always, always be grateful. When I was at Texas Southern University, I was afforded the opportunity to work at NASA with 2 graduate fellowships. And, even though I had worked at NASA, I never thought that I would be recruited or I would end up working for NASA. Very hard to get into NASA. But, when I graduated, NASA used to have these calls to recruit from specific universities from around the nation. And Texas Southern happened to be included in one of the calls. And so I went in, I had my resumes, went for an interviewed with somebody who wasn't necessarily the decision maker, but they thought enough of me to push me forward to the decision maker. Then, you have to know your resume backwards and forwards because guess when I got the call? I was headed into a drugstore, parking my car, I get a call, and it's the person who's going to hire me from NASA ready to interview me right then and there on the phone. Sight unseen. So I had to know what I wanted. I had to adjust my message when he said, well, we can't necessarily offer you this. Instead of being ungrateful, I had to adjust and say, well, you know what, this is fine. I can do this with this. So whatever you bring, whatever you send my way, I'm going to meet that so that I can meet your needs because I want this opportunity. So guess what? After I got my job, I didn't think, oh, I'm going to be making history. I'm going to be the first person of color to ever be a NASA toxicologist. I'm going to be the first female to ever be a NASA toxicologist. But I ran into someone else who had obtained a PhD in environmental toxicology, who had also applied. And he said, oh, well, Noreen, you got that job because of the way you look. Oh, really? Really? Did I? Do I look good? And I said, that's funny because the person who hired me gave me a phone interview and had never seen me. So I could have, handled that a different way that wasn't as nice, wasn't as pleasant. But instead, I just gave him the truth and let him kind of marinate on that. Because I still got selected and you still didn't. And, here I am today. So how did I become a multipreneur? Even before I started at NASA, even when I was in graduate school, I was consulting. After I left Xavier, I went into the petrochemical industry. I contracted for Exxon for several years. Then I left, took a permanent position with British Petroleum, which was still Amoco at the time. So after I got my master's, research master's in 2 years, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that 2 years because everybody else who started with me, they didn't have a job. I was the only one employed full-time. And it wasn't a master's where you could just take extra hours and get your master's. You had to perform research, you had to write a thesis, you had to defend it. And I did it in 2 years and nobody else did. So that was a big deal for me. But then when I went back to BP and it was like, okay, I'm ready for my next position. Oh no, you're doing such great work in the chromatography lab, we just want you to stay right there. Oh, okay. So sometimes doing too good of a job can be used against you? Okay. So what I said was, all right, I will take the smart way out. I'm going to take a leave of absence, which means that I'm not getting paid, but I technically still have my job, just in case I wanted to go back. Well, guess what? After my 5 years working on my PhD, successfully defending my dissertation, I got picked up by NASA and I never went back, and I love it. So then fast forward, I start getting calls to come overseas to talk about space toxicology. Because when I got to NASA, it was just called JSC toxicology. And I said, well, what we're doing here is unique. This is not what I studied in school. The space environment, the way chemicals deposit in the lungs, the way chemicals behave in space, and interact with the human body is totally different than what is, what I learned as an environmental toxicologist on Earth. This is a very specialized, area of toxicology. There are only 7 of us in the world. So that being said, I said, well, we're going to have to rebrand this. At NASA, we're all about acronyms and logos for different missions and space programs. So I said, we're going to design a logo. So I spearheaded that, got all the input from the toxicologists. At first, they kind of scoffed at me. It was all men and just me. And then they said, you know what, we like this. Let's do this. They got on board. I said, and now it's going to be space toxicology, not JSC toxicology, because JSC just means Johnson Space Center. That means nothing to the globe. Let's talk about what this really is. I didn't realize that doing that was going to give me the opportunity to be called to start speaking overseas. I didn't realize that was going to give me the opportunity to be the first lead author on the first chapter ever published in General Applied Toxicology, which is a multi-volume Bible for toxicology. It was such a big honor. And at the time when they asked me, and not the chief toxicologist, I said, you know what, Noreen, you can do this all by yourself and just take all the credit. But I said, you know what, I'm going to give him the respect of allowing him to co-author with me. Well, guess what he said to me? Oh, this is a big, big honor, Noreen. Who's going to be the lead author? What? It's going to be me, because they asked me. So again, people will try to take things from you, but you have to learn how to claim what's yours and still be humble enough to give other people the opportunity to also shine as well. And let me tell you what happened. Right before we were going to publish, all of a sudden he couldn't find any of his references. Now this is the chief toxicologist for all of NASA. He couldn't find any of his references. So he tried to sabotage me basically at the last minute. I said, guess what, I'll find your references. I found all your references, or I'll remove your part and I'll publish anyway. So what do you want to do? So guess what? He found a lot of his references. I probably only had to find 5. But anyway, he found his references and we published. And then I said, okay, the rest of you space toxicologists, we also need to let you shine. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to the greater toxicology community at the American College of Toxicology Conference. First ever forum on space toxicology. It was wonderful. It was a great opportunity. But then people started to say, well, why is she the one getting called for all this stuff? Why are they calling her overseas? Why are they paying for her to go over there? Why not me? Why not me? So then you have to learn how to adjust and sometimes temper what's going on with you around your colleagues so that they don't sabotage you at work. And that's a sad reality, but it's true.